We dismiss history at our peril.
Liberty Nation Radio with Mark Angelides.
From the Afghanistan withdrawal to Hunter Biden's laptop, and with a brief jaunt to Ukraine on the way, it seems that President Biden and his administration just can't do right for doing wrong. Now, is it because we mere mortals lack the insight and in-depth analysis of those at the top of the food chain? Or could the issue be something far, far simpler? Well, we're joined by former Principal Deputy Undersecretary of Defense Controller Dave Patterson to get to the bottom of why Joe Biden keeps getting it wrong. Welcome back, Dave.
Thank you, Mark. Happy to be with you.
Grand. So it seems to me, Dave, that a blindfolded chimpanzee with a dart could deliver a more consistent performance on foreign policy decisions. But that's just my opinion. Now, do I have it wrong? And despite what my senses tell me, is Biden doing a great job?
Come on now, let's not discount the capabilities of chimpanzees.
They get it right 50% of the time, apparently.
They do. I think it's basically a fundamental flaw in the way liberals look at the world that gets them into trouble always. They never see the world the way it really is. They see the world the way they wished it were. And that just simply never, ever works.
Yeah, it seems that there's a lot of wishful thinking in these approaches, especially with things like building back better, which pretty much every liberalized government across the world adopted at the same time, but is now sold as Joe Biden's centerpiece campaign. But let's talk about Ukraine for a moment. Let's drag that into the mud. From the beginning, it seems the administration, it was pretty much on the back foot, wasn't it? Despite even giving warnings that war was on its way, they seemed surprised when it actually did. And they reacted surprised, which is more important, I think. And then of course, we've had the flip-flops on the MiG-29s and a wealth of other missteps and miscommunications. So what's going on with that?
Well, I think it goes back a year. They've had a year to understand that when Putin put his troops, 70,000 to begin with, on the border of Ukraine, that was just a prelude, an overture to what he had in mind. The people who knew what was going on, of course, were the Ukrainians. And President Zelensky said in April of 2021, please help us. This is what's happening to us. And it didn't fit the narrative, because the narrative says, well, we can always sit down with the Russians. They'll see reason. And what possible good would it do for Russia to invade Ukraine? And then again, when Putin came out with his 5,000-word explanation of why he was going to invade Ukraine, nobody paid any attention to it. Not one serious media outlet gave it 2 minutes of airtime. That's why we're where we are.
Yeah, that really does seem a case of the administration was more than happy to bury its head in the sand. And it reminds me, I think it's Dr. Jordan Peterson, that talks about how a problem ignored eventually mounts up. Like, for example, if you ignore a bill, well, you're just not paying a $30 bill. But then, of course, that turns into demand, that turns into a legal action, that ruins your credit rating. And before you know it, the whole world's out of control. And it's because you ignored things when you had a chance to address them in an easy format. Now, I think a lot of people are beginning to feel that the intelligence community is perhaps more devoted to defending the status quo and the reputation of those in the White House, rather than solely focusing on American interests. And one thing that springs to mind was the 50-plus former intelligence officials who came out saying that Hunter Biden's laptop was clearly Russian disinformation. Now, that analysis, the air quotes there, set in motion the burying of that whole story, didn't it? And that was right before the 2020 election. But now it turns out, of course, that everybody's admitting that it was completely true about Hunter Biden's laptop, and hearing rumors that a third laptop, but that might or might not be in the hands of the Russian mafia, from what I'm hearing. So are there no consequences for the people who get these things wrong? So, for example, no consequences for the 50 former intelligence officials who branded it Russian disinformation, and no consequences for those that oversaw the desperate withdrawal from Afghanistan, and no consequences for those who ignored all of the warning signs, and not just warning signs, the very pleas from the Ukrainian president for more than a year. Why no consequences, Dave?
Well, there aren't any consequences because they put things in their letter like, we want to emphasize that we do not know if the emails provided are true, if we are right. And so they qualified their letter in practically every possible way and ended with, we do not know whether these press reports are accurate. Well, if you don't know whether the press reports are accurate, then why did you write the letter? This is the kind of thing that is extremely hurtful to the intelligence community. And I want to be very upfront. I have the greatest respect for the people in the field who have to do the intelligence community work day in and day out.
Absolutely, yeah.
But somehow, when what they perceive as true gets to Washington and Langley, their views of the world tend to get changed through a political lens that's simply not helpful. And consequently, people have less and less revere the intelligence community. And oh, by the way, this letter probably did more, if the Russians were behind it, to ensure that what the Russians wanted to have happen did happen.
Yeah, the self-fulfilling prophecies, isn't it? Now, you know, what you just said there, Dave, it reminds me of the Bay of Pigs invasion fiasco. So you had under Kennedy, you had this whole team of experts who came up with this plan. And the escape plan was, I believe it was some mountains like 80 miles away from the beach where they were supposed to be landing, that they were supposed to just retreat to if it all went wrong. It was so poorly thought out and executed. But then that same team, a few years later, had to deal with the Cuban Missile Crisis. And for all intents and purposes, they got that spot on. Now, I was reading in a book about super forecasters, political forecasters, and the author argues that the reason that the team got it so wrong at one point and so right on the other was that they'd learned to correct each other. They'd learned to be willing to contradict each other and to create arguments and tension and pushback. Now, is that something that the current administration seems not to be able to do?
Now let me reel you back a little bit on they got it right in the Cuban Missile Crisis. They got it totally wrong. The community, the CIA, the executives clearly said there won't be any nuclear missiles in Cuba because it doesn't fit the way the Russians do their business. And in fact, once the flyovers indicated and that there definitely were missiles, the senior executives still said, yes, but we were right because that's not what Russia would have done. So it goes back to the people who have to do the work, the people who look at overhead photographs. They're the ones who got it right. The executives got it wrong. And that's why they had 13 days to react. And at the time, 13 days was a very short period of time. Today, we have 16 hours effectively to react to things. So we got to get it right.
Dave Patterson, thank you ever so much.
Thank you, Mark. Happy to be with you.
If you, like many Americans, are waiting with bated breath to see how the Supreme Court will rule in the possible landmark Second Amendment and abortion cases, then don't go anywhere. We're back talking liberty on this exact issue. We dismiss history at our peril.
Liberty Nation Radio with Mark Angelides.
We're doing it for real, really real. Liberty Nation.
And Jeff Charles, contributor for LibertyNation.com.
I think we're starting to make an impact. Liberty style, fight for freedom.
The tracking poll sponsored by Liberty Nation for Thursday.
Mentioned by Dan Bongino, Rasmussen, Jordan Peterson, and
I can
others.
do it again if you want me to.
Cited in Mark Levin's American Marxism.
I think we're starting to make a really big impact. Get noticed. We're doing it. Rock on. I'm gone.